Sir, you need to leave now. The words left my mouth before my brain could stop them. Every head in the private dining room turned toward me. The crystal water glasses I was holding trembled in my hands, but I kept my eyes locked on Richard Castellano, the man in the perfectly tailored suit sitting across from the most dangerous person I had ever seen in my life. Castellano's smile didn't reach his eyes. Excuse me? My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I didn't back down. I said you need to leave. Now. The man on the other side of the table, the one everyone whispered about but never named out loud, slowly set down his pen. He hadn't signed yet. Thank God, he hadn't signed yet. You know that feeling when you realize the universe has given you one single moment to make a choice that will either save someone or destroy yourself. That was this moment. And I chose to speak. Let me tell you something about courage. Real courage isn't the absence of fear. Real courage is knowing exactly how badly things can go wrong and choosing to do the right thing anyway. Real courage is being a single mother with $70,000 in student loan debt, working double shifts at an upscale restaurant just to keep your daughter fed and your dying mother in a hospital bed, and still finding the strength to walk into a room full of people who could erase you from existence and tell them the truth. My name is Diana Mercer. And this is the story of how I went from being a brilliant financial analyst with a corner office view to a waitress serving overpriced steaks to criminals, and how one moment of absolute terror became the moment that changed everything. But I need to know something from you right now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Are you ready for this story? Because once I start telling you what really happened that night, once I take you through everything that led me to that private dining room with my hands shaking and my career already in ruins, you're going to understand why some battles are worth fighting even when you know you're going to lose. So here's what I need. I need you to stay with me. I need you to listen. And when this is over, I need you to tell me if I made the right choice. Deal? Hit that like button if you're ready to hear how a waitress took on the most untouchable man in the country and lived to tell about it. Subscribe because, trust me, you're going to want to know how this ends. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you would have done in my position. Now let me start from the beginning because you need to understand who I used to be before I can tell you who I became. 3 years and 4 months before that night in the restaurant, I was someone completely different. I was 26 years old, and I actually believed the world made sense. I believed that hard work mattered. I believed that truth mattered. I believed that if you were smart enough and persistent enough and good enough at your job, you could make a real difference. I worked for Morrison and Associates, one of the top financial consulting firms in the country. My office was on the 42nd floor. I had my own assistant. I made 6 figures before I turned 25. I wore designer suits that cost more than my monthly rent used to cost, and I thought I had finally made it. My specialty was forensic accounting. I was the person companies hired when they needed to know if their numbers were real or if someone was cooking the books. I was good at it too. Really good. I could look at a spreadsheet and spot irregularities that other people missed. I could trace money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. I could find patterns in data that looked random to everyone else. I loved my job. I loved the puzzle of it, the satisfaction of uncovering the truth hidden in columns of numbers. I loved knowing that my work protected honest companies from fraud. I loved believing I was one of the good guys. My daughter Emma was 3 years old then. My mother was healthy, living in her own apartment, babysitting Emma while I worked those long hours. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. It was stable. I was building something. Then I got assigned to the Castellano portfolio. I remember the morning my boss Gerald Patterson called me into his office. He was a senior partner, 20 years older than me, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. He handed me a thick folder and smiled. Diana, I'm putting you on something big. The Castellano Group. They're one of our most important clients. I need you to do a full analysis of their subsidiary companies. Standard audit, nothing too invasive. Just make sure everything looks clean for their investors. I took the folder back to my office and started reading. The Castellano Group had their fingers in everything. Real estate development, import and export, logistics companies, construction firms. On paper, it all looked legitimate. successful, even. Richard Castellano had built an empire over 30 years, and everyone treated him like a business genius. But something felt wrong from the start. It was small things at first. A construction company that reported massive profits but had almost no actual building projects. An import business that moved shipping containers through 3 different ports for no clear logistical reason. Real estate holdings that changed hands between subsidiaries at prices that didn't match market value. I started digging deeper. I requested additional documentation. I cross-referenced transactions with public records. I built spreadsheets tracking money flows between different entities. And the more I looked, the clearer it became. The Castellano Group wasn't a legitimate business empire. It was a sophisticated money laundering operation. Dirty money was coming in through the import companies, getting washed through construction projects that barely existed, then emerging clean through real estate sales. It was elegant, really. Complex enough that casual oversight would miss it, but once you saw the pattern, it was undeniable. I spent 3 weeks building my case. I documented everything. I had transaction records, shipping manifests, construction permits that didn't match reported expenses, property transfers that made no economic sense. I had enough evidence to prove that hundreds of millions of dollars were being laundered through these companies every year. I was so proud of that work. I thought I was about to expose one of the biggest financial crimes in the country. I thought I was going to be a hero. I scheduled a meeting with Gerald and walked into his office with my report printed and bound, every detail footnoted and verified. I laid it all out for him. The suspicious transactions. The shell companies. The proof that this wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping but deliberate, systematic fraud. Gerald listened to my entire presentation without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and looked at me with something like amusement. "Diana," he said, "you've done excellent work here. Really excellent. But I think you're seeing patterns that aren't there." I stared at him. "Gerald, the evidence is right here. These companies exist only on paper. The money flows don't make any legitimate business sense. This is textbook laundering." He smiled. Actually smiled. "I think you're overreaching. The Castellano Group is one of our most valued clients. They've been with this firm for 15 years. If there were real problems, don't you think someone would have noticed before now?" "Maybe no one looked closely enough," I said. "Or maybe someone didn't want to see it." His smile disappeared. "Be very careful what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm showing you proof of criminal activity. We have a legal obligation to report this." "We have an obligation to our clients," Gerald said. "And right now, you're making very serious accusations without understanding the full context. I'm going to ask you to drop this." Drop it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Gerald, this is fraud. This is money laundering on a massive scale. We can't just ignore it." "Diana." His voice went cold. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you. Close the file. Write a clean report saying everything is in order. And move on to your next assignment." That's when I understood. He knew. Of course he knew. Morrison and Associates had been working with the Castellano Group for 15 years, and I was supposed to believe no one had ever noticed these glaring irregularities? Gerald wasn't dismissing my evidence because it was weak. He was dismissing it because he was part of it. I left his office with my report still in my hands and my whole world tilting sideways. Everything I believed about my company, about my career, about the systems that were supposed to protect truth and justice, all of it was crumbling. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. If Gerald was compromised, I would go over his head. Morrison and Associates had other senior partners. The managing director, Thomas Bradley, had a reputation for integrity. He had built the firm on principles of transparency and ethical practice. Surely he would listen. I spent another week gathering even more evidence, making my case even stronger. I documented every conversation with Gerald, every time he had tried to shut down my investigation. I built a timeline showing exactly how the money moved and where it went. I was meticulous. I was thorough. I was absolutely certain that once the right person saw this evidence, everything would be fixed. I requested a private meeting with Thomas Bradley. His assistant tried to put me off, but I insisted it was urgent. Finally, she gave me 15 minutes on a Friday afternoon. I walked into his office with my expanded report, now over 200 pages of documented fraud. I laid it all out. The money laundering, Gerald's complicity, the scope of the criminal enterprise we were helping to legitimize. Thomas Bradley read through my evidence for 10 minutes, without speaking. Then he closed the folder, folded his hands on his desk, and looked at me with something I couldn't quite identify. Was it pity? Was it regret? Miss Mercer, he said quietly, you're a talented analyst. You have a brilliant future ahead of you. But you've made a serious error in judgment here. Sir, the evidence, he interrupted, shows that you don't understand how business works at this level. Richard Castellano is not just a client. He's connected to people at the highest levels of government and industry. He has relationships with senators, with federal judges, with the kinds of people who can make or break careers with a phone call. So, we're just going to let him commit crimes because he's powerful? We're going to recognize that there are some battles you can't win, Thomas said. And some people you can't touch. Richard Castellano is untouchable, Diana. Not by us. Not by law enforcement. Not by anyone who wants to keep their career intact. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand that you're asking me to be complicit in a crime. His expression hardened. I'm asking you to be realistic. But since you seem determined to be difficult about this, let me be very clear. If you pursue this matter any further, if you take this evidence to anyone outside this firm, if you even mention the Castellano Group again, you will be terminated. And not just terminated, blacklisted. You will never work in finance again. No firm will touch you. Your career will be over before you turn 30. My hands were shaking. You can't do that. I can, he said. And I will. Richard Castellano has spent 3 decades building relationships that protect him from exactly this kind of problem. He has people in the Justice Department. He has people in the SEC. He has dirt on politicians and judges and prosecutors. If he wanted to, he could probably get the president impeached. That's how untouchable he is. And you're a 26-year-old analyst who thinks she knows better than everyone else. He stood up, indicating the meeting was over. Go home, Diana. Think very carefully about your next move. And on Monday, I expect you to come back with a clean report saying the Castellano Group is in full compliance. Or I expect your resignation letter. Those are your only 2 options. I walked out of his office in a daze. Everything I had worked for, everything I believed about justice and truth and doing the right thing, it was all meaningless. The bad guys weren't just winning. They had already won. They owned the game. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen what I had seen. I couldn't write a fake report saying everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. So on Monday morning, I didn't turn in a clean report. And I didn't turn in a resignation letter. I walked into the office, packed up my personal belongings, and waited for security to escort me out, which they did 90 minutes after I arrived. Thomas Bradley didn't even have the decency to tell me himself. He sent HR. Your employment with Morrison and Associates has been terminated effective immediately, the HR director said. You'll receive 2 weeks severance. Sign here. What's the reason for termination? I asked. Performance issues. That's a lie. She didn't even blink. Sign here. I signed. What else could I do? But it got worse. Much worse. Within a week, I understood what Thomas Bradley had meant by blacklisted. I started applying for jobs immediately. I had a strong resume, excellent references from previous positions, a track record of success. I should have had offers within days. Instead, I got nothing. Not even interviews. The first rejection came from Sanderson Financial, a firm where I had a contact who had been trying to recruit me for months. When I called him, his voice went cold. Diana, I can't help you. I don't know what you did at Morrison, but word is out that you're trouble.
I'm sorry.
What word? Who's saying what? I can't discuss it. Good luck. He hung up. I tried 10 more firms. 15.
20.
Every single one either rejected me outright or stopped returning my calls after the initial conversation. It was like I had been marked with some invisible scarlet letter that every hiring manager could see. My savings started disappearing. The rent on my nice apartment, the car payment, the student loans that never stopped coming. I had been making enough to live comfortably and pay down debt, but now every dollar mattered. I tried going outside finance. Maybe I could do general accounting, bookkeeping, anything with numbers. But somehow, the blacklist followed me there too. It was like Richard Castellano's reach extended everywhere. 3 months after losing my job, I lost my apartment. I moved in with my mother, cramming Emma's toddler bed into the tiny second bedroom. My mother was supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She was 62 years old, living on a fixed income, and now she had her daughter and granddaughter depending on her too. It's temporary, I kept saying. I'll find something soon, but I didn't find anything. 6 months passed. Then 9 months. My student loan payments went into default. Collection agencies started calling. My credit score plummeted. I applied for jobs I was overqualified for, positions that paid a third of what I used to make, and still got rejected. I was drowning and no one was throwing me a lifeline. Emma turned 4, and I threw her a birthday party at the public park because I couldn't afford anything else. She was happy with a grocery store cake and dollar store decorations. She didn't understand that a year ago, we had been planning a party at one of those fancy indoor play places. She didn't know that her mother used to be someone important. That was almost a blessing. At least Emma was too young to understand how far we had fallen. My mother tried to help however she could. She watched Emma while I went to job interviews that led nowhere. She stretched her Social Security check to cover groceries. She told me everything would be okay, even though we both knew it might not be. I finally found work at a call center. $8 an hour, no benefits, sitting in a cubicle reading scripts to people who hated me for interrupting their dinner. It was humiliating. Every day, I sat there thinking about how I used to analyze billion-dollar portfolios, and now I was begging strangers to switch their cable providers. But it was income. Barely enough to contribute to my mother's household expenses and keep Emma in daycare while I worked. Not enough to move out. Not enough to make a dent in the debt. Not enough to feel like anything except a complete failure. The worst part was the silence. No one from Morrison and Associates reached out. Colleagues I had considered friends stopped answering my texts. The professional network I had spent years building evaporated like it had never existed. I was erased. And Richard Castellano? He was still out there, still laundering money, still untouchable. I would see his name in business journals occasionally, always praising his latest venture or philanthropic contribution. The man was a criminal, and he was being treated like a pillar of the community. I tried to let it go. I tried to accept that some battles couldn't be won, that I had to focus on survival instead of justice. I tried to make peace with the fact that doing the right thing had cost me everything while the bad guys faced no consequences at all. But I never forgot. Not the evidence I had gathered. Not the pattern of transactions. Not the shell companies and the fake construction projects and the real estate transfers that made no sense. All of it was burned into my memory. 14 months after I lost my job, everything got worse. My mother collapsed at the grocery store. 1 minute she was comparing prices on chicken breasts, the next she was on the floor having a seizure. The ambulance took her to County General, and after 2 days of tests, the doctors gave us the diagnosis. Stage 3 lung cancer. Aggressive. Metastasized. She had never smoked a day in her life, but apparently that didn't matter. Cancer didn't care about fairness or justice or whether you had already been through enough. The oncologist was kind but direct. With treatment, we're looking at maybe 18 months. Without treatment, probably 6. What does treatment cost? I asked, even though I already knew the answer would destroy me. With insurance, you'd be looking at about 20% of the total cost. Without insurance, he trailed off. My mother didn't have insurance that covered this. Neither did I. We were looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars we didn't have. We'll figure it out, I told my mother, holding her hand in that sterile hospital room. We'll get you the treatment. I promise. She smiled weakly. Diana, honey, maybe it's time to let me go. You can't afford this. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. But she was right. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford anything. I was barely keeping us fed on my call center salary. I took out a loan against my car. I maxed out the one credit card that hadn't been canceled yet. I borrowed money from the few friends who were still speaking to me. I set up a fundraising page online that raised $3,000, which disappeared into medical bills within a week. My mother started chemotherapy. I watched her hair fall out, watched her lose 30 pounds, watched her struggle to keep food down. Emma asked why Grandma was so sick, and I didn't have any good answers. I needed more money, desperately. So I started applying for anything. Retail, restaurants, cleaning services, anything that might pay better than the call center. I went to interview after interview, begging managers to give me a chance even though I was clearly overqualified, and they knew I would leave the moment something better came along. Finally, I got hired at Riverside Grill. It was an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where business people took clients to impress them. The kind of place I used to eat at when I had an expense account and a career. Now I would be serving those people, carrying their plates, refilling their wine glasses, hoping they would tip well enough that I could pay for my mother's next round of medication. The irony wasn't lost on me. The manager who hired me was a woman named Lisa Bradley, no relation to Thomas Bradley. Thank God. She looked at my resume with its fancy degrees and impressive job history and raised an eyebrow. You worked at Morrison and Associates? Yes. Why are you applying to wait tables? I had prepared an answer for this question. I'm taking care of my sick mother and need flexible hours. It wasn't entirely a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Lisa studied me for a long moment. Can you handle difficult customers? Yes. Can you remember complex orders? I used to track financial portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I think I can remember who ordered the salmon. She almost smiled. You're overqualified. I'm desperate. That honesty seemed to work. Okay. You start Monday. Training is 2 weeks. After that, you'll work dinner shifts Thursday through Sunday. Tips are pooled and split based on hours worked. Don't steal from the register. Don't mess up VIP orders, and don't sleep with the chef. Those are the only rules that will get you fired immediately. I took the job. $8 an hour plus tips. It averaged out to maybe $15 an hour on good nights. It was more than the call center, and the hours meant I could be home with Emma during the day while my mother rested. So that became my life. I woke up at 6, got Emma ready for daycare, took my mother to chemotherapy appointments twice a week, came home to cook dinner, then left for my shift at Riverside Grill at 4 in the afternoon. I served expensive steaks to people who looked through me like I was invisible. I smiled and nodded and pretended I didn't know more about business and finance than most of the customers combined. My feet hurt constantly. My back ached from carrying heavy trays. I came home smelling like grease and wine and other people's food. Emma would already be asleep, and my mother would be dozing in front of the television, too exhausted from treatment to stay awake. This was my life now. This was what happened when you tried to fight people who couldn't be touched. The other servers were nice enough. Most of them were younger, working their way through college or trying to make it as artists or actors. They didn't understand why someone with my background was slinging plates, but they didn't ask too many questions either. I kept my head down. I did my job. I tried not to think about the fact that I was 30 years old, drowning in debt, watching my mother die slowly, raising my daughter in a one-bedroom apartment, and serving food to the kinds of people I used to be. 2 years and 3 months after I lost my job at Morrison, my mother's cancer went into remission. It was a miracle. The doctors couldn't explain it. The tumors had shrunk. Her energy came back. She started eating again. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe we could actually survive this. I told you we'd figured out, I said, hugging her in the oncology wing.
You did this, she said.
You saved my life. But the medical bills didn't disappear just because she was in remission. I now owed over $200,000 to various hospitals, doctors, and collection agencies. My credit was destroyed beyond repair. I would be paying this debt for the rest of my life. Still, my mother was alive. That was worth everything. Emma was 6 now, smart and curious and full of questions about why we lived with grandma and why mommy worked at night and why we couldn't afford the things her friends at school had. I tried to explain in ways she could understand, but how do you tell your daughter that you lost everything because you tried to do the right thing? I kept working at Riverside Grill. The tips were steady. The work was mindless enough that I could do it on autopilot. And honestly, there was something almost peaceful about the simplicity of it. Take the order. Bring the food. Clear the plates. No complex analysis.
No exige dilemas.
No world-changing decisions. Just survival. One shift at a time. I had almost convinced myself that this was okay. That I had made my peace with how things had turned out. That I could live the rest of my life in this diminished state and be grateful for what I still had. Then, 3 years and 4 months after Richard Castellano destroyed my career, he walked into my restaurant. I was refilling water glasses at table 7 when I saw him walk through the front entrance. Richard Castellano looked exactly the same as he had in the photos I had studied for weeks when I was building my case against him. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, silver hair styled perfectly, the kind of confidence that comes from never facing consequences for anything. My hands froze on the water pitcher. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He was here. The man who had ruined my life was standing 30 feet away, talking to Lisa about a private dining room reservation. I ducked into the kitchen before he could see me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. 3 years. 3 years I had spent trying to forget about him, trying to move on, trying to accept that justice didn't exist for people like Richard Castellano. And now he was here. You okay? Marcus, one of the line cooks, asked. You look like you saw a ghost.
Ai fine, ilid.
Just felt dizzy for a second. I leaned against the stainless steel counter and tried to steady my breathing. It was fine.
He wouldn't recognize me.
I was just another waitress in a sea of service workers. People like Richard Castellano didn't look closely enough at people like me to remember faces. Lisa poked her head into the kitchen. Diana, you're taking the private dining room tonight. VIP client. Big tipper, if you don't mess it up. Of course. Of course I was. Can someone else take it? I asked. I'm not feeling great. Everyone else is slammed. It's just 2 people, easy table. You'll be fine. She disappeared before I could argue further. I stood there for a long moment, trying to decide what to do. I could fake being sick, go home early, avoid the whole situation. But I needed the money. VIP clients meant big tips, and I had a credit card payment due in 3 days that I couldn't miss. Besides, what were the odds he would even remember me? I had only met him once, briefly, when I was still at Morrison and Associates. He had come in for a quarterly review meeting. I had been introduced as part of the team. He had shaken my hand, smiled, and forgotten I existed before the meeting even ended. I was nobody to him. I had always been nobody to him. So I straightened my apron, grabbed a notepad, and walked out to the private dining room with my head high and my game face on. Richard Castellano was already seated at the table, looking at his phone. The second chair was still empty. Good evening, I said in my professional waitress voice. Can I start you with something to drink? He didn't even look up. Scotch.
Neat.
Top shelf. Of course. I walked to the bar, got his drink, came back, and set it in front of him. He still didn't look at me. I was furniture to him. Scenery. Completely invisible.
Good.
That was exactly what I needed. Your guest should be here soon, he said, still staring at his phone. When he arrives, give us 10 minutes before you come back. Understood. I left the private dining room and tried to calm down. It was fine. I was fine. I would serve their dinner, take their money, and go home. Richard Castellano would never know that the waitress bringing his steak was the same analyst who had tried to expose his entire criminal empire. 20 minutes later, his guest arrived. And that's when everything changed. The man who walked into the private dining room was not what I expected. Richard Castellano's dinner companions were usually other businessmen, lawyers, politicians. People in expensive suits with expensive watches, and that same aura of untouchable power. This man was different. He was younger than Castellano, maybe late 30s, with dark hair and darker eyes. He wore a suit, but it sat on him like armor rather than costume. There was something dangerous about the way he moved, controlled and deliberate, like a predator assessing every exit in the room. And when he looked at me, as I held the door open for him, really looked at me, I felt a jolt of recognition, even though I had never seen him before in my life. This was not a businessman. This was someone infinitely more dangerous. "Good evening," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Your table is ready." He nodded once, his eyes lingering on me for just a moment longer than necessary, then walked past me into the private dining room. I gave them 10 minutes like Castellano had requested, then returned to take their orders. They were deep in conversation when I entered, speaking in low voices that immediately went quiet when I approached. Castellano looked annoyed at the interruption. The other man just watched me with those unsettling dark eyes. "Are you ready to order?" I asked. "Not yet," Castellano said dismissively. "Come back in 20 minutes. I nodded and left, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. The tension in that room was palpable. This wasn't a friendly business dinner. This was something else entirely. I busied myself with other tables, but I kept glancing toward the private dining room. Through the partially open door, I could see them talking intently. Castellano had pulled out a folder of documents. The other man was reading through them carefully, page by page. 30 minutes passed. I went back to check on them. "Gentlemen, can I get you anything?" "Water," the dark-eyed man said. His voice was deep, controlled. "And we're ready to order." I took their orders, brought their food, refilled drinks, did all the normal server tasks. But the entire time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching something important unfold. They ate quickly, barely touching their expensive steaks. The conversation continued in those same low, intense tones. Castellano was smiling more now, relaxed, confident. The other man remained guarded, but he seemed to be warming up to whatever Castellano was proposing. After they finished eating, I cleared their plates and brought coffee. That's when I saw the documents spread across the table. I had trained myself not to look too closely at customers' papers. People had business dinners here all the time, and it wasn't my place to snoop. But as I set down the coffee cups, my eyes caught on a number at the top of one page. $250 million. My brain, trained by years of analyzing financial documents, processed the information automatically.
This was a contract.
A deal memo. A proposed business arrangement involving a staggering amount of money. And then I saw the company names. Castellano Logistics International. CLT Import-Export. Riverside Development Corporation. I knew those names. I had spent weeks studying those companies 3 years ago. They were the shell corporations. The money laundering fronts. The fake businesses that Richard Castellano used to clean dirty money. My hands were shaking as I set down the second coffee cup. I needed to get out of that room before they noticed. "Will there be anything else?" I asked, somehow keeping my voice steady. "No," Castellano said. "Just the check when we're ready. We need some privacy to finalize this." I nodded and left, my mind racing. Richard Castellano was sitting in my restaurant, trying to lure someone into a business deal involving his criminal enterprises. And whoever this other man was, he clearly had no idea what he was getting into. It wasn't my problem. I had learned that lesson the hard way. Getting involved in Richard Castellano's business had destroyed my life once already. I needed to stay out of it. But as I stood at the server station, pretending to organize napkins while my thoughts spun out of control, I couldn't stop thinking about that number. $250 million. That wasn't just money. That was someone's entire fortune. Maybe multiple people's fortunes. And Castellano was about to steal it. I had seen this exact pattern before. Castellano would set up what looked like a legitimate business deal. The other party would invest money, thinking they were buying into profitable companies. Then slowly, systematically, that money would get siphoned away through fake expenses, fraudulent transfers, shell company transactions. By the time the victim realized what was happening, the money would be gone, and Castellano would have legal documentation showing that everything was done according to the contract. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was about to happen again, right in front of me. I walked back to the private dining room to drop off their check. Through the door, I could see Castellano sliding a pen across the table toward the other man. The documents were stacked neatly, ready to be signed. "This is going to be the start of a very profitable partnership," Castellano was saying, his voice warm with false sincerity. "Once you sign, we can move forward with the first phase immediately." The dark-eyed man picked up the pen. And that's when I recognized one of the subsidiary company names on the document. CLT Import-Export. I had traced that company's transactions through 6 different ports for different countries and a dozen different accounts. It existed only to move money that didn't belong to Richard Castellano until it did. If this man signed those papers, he was signing away $250 million to a criminal who would drain every penny and leave him with nothing but worthless contracts and empty promises. I stood frozen in the doorway with their check in my hand, watching the pen move toward the signature line. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to walk away, to mind my own business, to remember what happened the last time I tried to expose Richard Castellano. But there was another voice too, smaller but more insistent. The voice that had made me go into forensic accounting in the first place. The voice that believed truth mattered and justice mattered, and that sometimes you had to stand up even when it was terrifying. The pen touched the paper, and I heard myself say, "Sir, you need to leave now." Both men looked up at me in shock. The pen stopped moving. "Excuse me?" Castellano said, his voice dangerous. I looked at the dark-eyed man, ignoring Castellano completely. "Sir, I need you to step outside with me.
Right now.
Before you sign anything." The man set down the pen and studied me carefully. There was something calculating in his expression, like he was assessing whether I was a threat or an opportunity. "I'm in the middle of important business," he said quietly. "I understand," I said. "But if you sign those papers, you're going to lose everything.
Please trust me."
"Just 5 minutes of your time." Castellano stood up abruptly, his face flushing red. "What do you think you're doing? Get out. You're fired." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. "Sir, please. Look at page 7 of that contract. The subsidiary company listed there, CLT Import-Export. It doesn't exist. Not really. It's a shell corporation used for money laundering. Every company listed in this deal is part of a fraud network. If you invest this money, you will never see it again." The silence in the room was deafening. The dark-eyed man looked at me, then at Castellano, then back at the documents on the table. Castellano's voice went ice cold. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Actually," I said, "I know exactly what I've done. I'm saving this man from making the biggest mistake of his life. And I have documentation to prove everything I just said." That was a bluff. I didn't have the documentation anymore. It was all gone, deleted from my computer when I was fired from Morrison and Associates. But Castellano didn't know that. The dark-eyed man stood up slowly.
"Show me," he said.
I led him out of the private dining room, very aware that Richard Castellano was following close behind, his fury radiating like heat. "You can't possibly believe this waitress over me," Castellano said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I've been in business for 30 years. My reputation is impeccable. She's clearly unstable." The dark-eyed man ignored him completely, his focus entirely on me. "You said you have documentation." We reached the hostess stand. Lisa was staring at us with wide eyes, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. The dinner rush was in full swing around us, other diners glancing over curiously at the commotion. "Not here," I said. "Can we go somewhere private?" "My car," the man said immediately. He looked at Castellano. "Wait here." "Absolutely not," Castellano snapped. "This is ridiculous. You're going to blow up a $250 million deal because some waitress has delusions." The dark-eyed man's expression didn't change, but something in his stillness made Castellano take a step back. I said, "Wait here." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the kind of authority that made it clear this man was used to being obeyed without question. Castellano's face went from red to pale. "You're making a serious mistake." "Maybe," the man said. "But I don't sign anything without understanding all the variables." 5 minutes. He gestured for me to walk ahead of him. As we passed through the restaurant, I caught Lisa's eye. She looked like she wanted to stop me, to ask what the hell was happening, but something about the situation made her stay quiet. Outside, a black car was waiting at the curb. The driver, a massive man who looked more like a bodyguard than a chauffeur, opened the back door without being asked. "Get in," the dark-eyed man said. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me not to get into a car with a stranger, especially one who radiated danger the way this man did. But I had already committed to this insane course of action. Backing out now wouldn't save me from Richard Castellano's wrath. I climbed into the back seat. The dark-eyed man slid in beside me, and the driver closed the door, sealing us in leather-scented silence.
Talk, the man said.
And be very specific about what you think you know. Up close, he was even more intimidating. There was a scar along his jawline, barely visible, but definitely there. His suit was expensive but functional, tailored to allow movement rather than just appearance. And his eyes, now that I was looking directly into them, were absolutely merciless. This was not a businessman. This was someone who hurt people for a living. And I had just dragged him away from a deal worth $250 million based on information I couldn't actually prove anymore. "My name is Diana Mercer," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. 3 years ago, I was a forensic accountant at Morrison & Associates. I was assigned to audit the Castellano Group's subsidiary companies. And his voice gave nothing away. And I discovered that the entire operation is a money laundering network. The companies in that contract you were about to sign, CLT Import-Export, Riverside Development Corporation, Castellano Logistics International, they're all shells. They exist on paper. They have just enough legitimate activity to pass casual inspection, but their real purpose is to wash dirty money. You have proof of this? I had proof. I documented everything. Transaction records, shipping manifests that didn't match reported cargo, construction projects that were never actually built, real estate transfers at inflated prices between subsidiary companies. It was all there. Where is this documentation now? I swallowed hard.
Gone.
When I reported what I found to my superiors at Morrison & Associates, they fired me and destroyed all my files. Richard Castellano has connections at every level. Senators, judges, federal prosecutors. No one will touch him because he's too powerful. The man studied me in silence for a long moment. I couldn't read his expression at all. "So you have no proof," he finally said. "Not physical documentation, no. But I remember everything. I spent 3 weeks building that case. I know the pattern of how his operations work. That contract you were about to sign, the investment structure, the payment schedules, the subsidiary involvement, it's textbook Castellano. You would wire the initial investment to what looks like a legitimate holding company. Then that money would get transferred through 3 or 4 subsidiaries, each taking a percentage for operational expenses that don't actually exist. By the time you realized something was wrong, the money would be untraceable and Castellano would have lawyers showing you signed contracts authorizing every transfer." "Why would you risk warning me?" he asked. "You said yourself that Castellano is untouchable. Getting involved in his business destroyed your career. Why do it again?" That was a good question. I had been asking myself the same thing from the moment the words left my mouth back in that dining room. "Because I remember what it felt like to discover the truth and have no one believe me," I said quietly. "I remember being dismissed and destroyed for trying to do the right thing. And I couldn't watch it happen to someone else, even a stranger, without at least trying to warn them." He was quiet for another long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Vincent, I need you to run a full background check on every company in the Castellano portfolio. Everything. Ownership structures, transaction histories, connections to other entities. I need it in 2 hours." He hung up and looked at me again. "If you're lying to me, if this is some kind of setup or con, you understand what will happen?" "I'm not lying," I said. "I wish I was. My life would be a lot easier if Richard Castellano was exactly who he pretends to be. Your life would be easier if you had stayed out of this entirely." "Probably," I admitted. "But I've never been good at taking the easy path." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. "What's your name?" I asked, suddenly realizing I had no idea who I was talking to. "Dante," he said. "Dante Moretti." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should have. Like he was used to people recognizing it and reacting with either fear or respect. "Should I know who you are?" I asked. Now, he definitely almost smiled. "Most people in this city do. But apparently you've been too busy serving overpriced steaks to keep up with current events." "I've been busy surviving," I said. "After Castellano destroyed my career, I've had other priorities." "What happened?" he asked. "After you were fired?" I didn't know why I told him. Maybe because I had already gone this far, already burned every bridge by confronting Castellano publicly. Maybe because there was something about Dante Moretti's complete focus, the way he listened like every word mattered, that made me want to be honest. So I told him everything. The blacklist.
The debt.
My mother's cancer.
Emma.
The 3 years of barely surviving while Richard Castellano continued living his life without consequences. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You have a daughter," he said.
Yes. Emma.
"She's 6. And Richard Castellano knows your name. Knows you're the one who tried to expose him 3 years ago." A chill went down my spine. I hadn't thought about that part. Probably. "So, by confronting him tonight, by interfering in his business again, you've made yourself a target. You understand that." I did understand, now that he was saying it out loud. Richard Castellano had let me survive the first time because I was neutralized, discredited, no longer a threat. But tonight I had humiliated him in front of a potential business partner. I had cost him a massive deal. I had proven that I was still willing to fight him. Men like Castellano didn't forgive that kind of insult. I didn't think about it. I admitted. I just reacted. That was stupid. "I know. Brave," he added. "But stupid." His phone buzzed. He answered it, listened for a moment, then said, "Good. Keep digging." He looked at me. "My people are finding irregularities in Castellano's companies. Nothing definitive yet, but enough to confirm you're not completely insane." "I'm not insane at all," I said. "I'm just cursed with the ability to see patterns other people miss. That's a dangerous skill to have."
I've noticed.
He made another call. "I need a security detail.
3 men.
Now." He rattled off the restaurant's address, then hung up. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Making sure Richard Castellano doesn't kill you before I finish investigating your claims," Dante said matter-of-factly. "If you're telling the truth, you just saved me from losing $250 million. That's worth keeping you alive. And if I'm not telling the truth?" His expression went cold. "Then you'll wish Castellano had gotten to you first." The car door opened. The massive driver leaned in. "Boss, there's a situation." Dante was out of the car instantly. I followed, my heart pounding. Richard Castellano was standing on the sidewalk, his phone pressed to his ear, his face twisted with rage. When he saw us emerge from the car, he ended his call and stalked toward us. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said, directing his fury entirely at me. "Do you think you can humiliate me? Cost me this deal? I destroyed you once. I'll do it again. Except this time I won't stop with your career." Dante stepped between us smoothly, his presence suddenly imposing in a way that made Castellano stop short. "You're done here," Dante said quietly. "Walk away." "This doesn't concern you anymore," Castellano said. "I'm withdrawing my offer. We have no deal."
Correct.
"We have no deal. Now leave." Castellano's eyes darted between Dante and me. "You're making enemies you can't afford, Moretti. I have connections you can't imagine." "So do I," Dante said. "And mine are significantly less forgiving than yours. Go." For a moment, I thought Castellano might push it further. But something in Dante's stillness, that predatory calm, made him reconsider. "This isn't over," Castellano said, looking directly at me. "You crossed a line tonight. There are consequences for that." He turned and walked away, pulling out his phone again. I was shaking. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that, but from the adrenaline crash of what I had just done. "You need to go home," Dante said, turning to me. Pack a bag for you and your daughter. My men will take you somewhere safe.
What? No.
I can't just leave.
My mother is sick.
I have work tomorrow. I have a life, such as it is. Your mother will be protected too. As for work. He glanced at the restaurant. I'm fairly certain you're fired anyway.
He was probably right about that.
Why are you helping me?
I asked.
You don't know me. For all you know, I could be lying about everything. You're not lying, he said. I've been in business long enough to recognize truth when I hear it. And besides, he paused, something unreadable crossing his face. I appreciate people who fight for what's right, even when it costs them everything. That's rare. 3 men appeared from a second car I hadn't noticed. They looked like they came from the same mold as Dante's driver. Large, capable, dangerous. Take her home, Dante told them. Let her pack. Then bring her and her family to the safe house on Riverside. No one gets close to them. Boss, what about the Castellano situation? One of the men asked. I'll handle it. Just keep them safe. He looked at me one more time. You did something very brave and very stupid tonight, Diana Mercer. Now you're going to have to live with the consequences. But you won't face them alone. Then he was gone, sliding back into his car and disappearing into the night, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with 3 armed men and the terrifying realization that I had just upended my entire life again. Only this time, I had no idea if I would survive it. The drive to my mother's apartment felt surreal. I sat in the back seat of an SUV with tinted windows, flanked by 2 men who hadn't spoken a word since we left the restaurant. The third man drove, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors like he expected someone to follow us. Maybe someone was following us. I had no idea how any of this worked. My phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. What the hell just happened? Call me. I didn't call. What would I even say? Sorry I abandoned my shift to confront a criminal and got myself tangled up with someone who might be even more dangerous? Sorry I probably just lost the only job keeping my family fed? Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. This is Dante. Save this number. If anything feels wrong, call immediately. I saved it, my hands still trembling. We pulled up to the apartment building 20 minutes later. It looked even more rundown than usual, the exterior lights flickering, trash scattered around the entrance. This was home. This was what my life had become after trying to fight Richard Castellano the first time. And now I had done it again. Wait here, one of the men said. Let us check the building first. Check for what? He looked at me like I was incredibly naive. Threats. They disappeared into the building while I waited in the car with the driver. 5 minutes passed.
10.
I was starting to panic, imagining all the terrible things that could be happening upstairs, when my phone rang. It was my mother. Diana? There are men in our apartment. They say you sent them. It's okay, Mom. I'll explain everything. I'm coming up. I got out of the car. The driver followed me into the building, up the 3 flights of stairs to the apartment. The door was open, and I could see my mother standing in the living room looking bewildered, while 2 large men checked our tiny apartment like they were searching for bombs. Diana, what's going on? My mother asked as I entered. Emma was on the couch in her pajamas, eyes wide with excitement rather than fear. Mommy, are these police? Not exactly, baby, I said, pulling her into a hug. They're here to help us. Help with what? My mother pressed. I looked at her tired face, her thin frame still recovering from years of chemotherapy and treatment, and I wanted to cry. She had been through so much already. She didn't deserve this. I need you to trust me, I said. We need to pack some bags and go somewhere safe for a few days. Safe from what, Diana? From someone very dangerous who I made very angry tonight. Her face went pale. What did you do? The right thing, I said. I think. I hope. But it's complicated, and we need to move quickly. One of Dante's men appeared from the bedroom. Building is clear. No signs of surveillance. But we should move fast. I went into the bedroom I shared with Emma and started throwing clothes into a duffel bag. Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit. Her blanket. My own clothes. whatever I could grab quickly. I added the folder I kept hidden in my closet, the one containing every scrap of information I had managed to save about the Castellano case before they erased everything else. My mother appeared in the doorway. "Diana, you're scaring me." "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But I promise I'm going to explain everything. We just need to go first." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll pack my medications." 15 minutes later, we were back in the SUV, my mother in the front seat looking shell-shocked, Emma between me and one of Dante's men in the back, chattering excitedly about the adventure we were having. "Where are we going?" my mother asked. "Riverside," the driver said. "Safe location." We drove through the city, taking turns that seemed random but were probably carefully planned. Emma eventually fell asleep against my shoulder. My mother stared out the window, silent. The safe house turned out to be a penthouse apartment in a building I would never be able to afford to even walk past normally. The lobby had actual marble floors and a doorman who nodded to Dante's men like he knew exactly who they were. The apartment itself was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine, a kitchen bigger than my entire current living space. There were 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and enough space that Emma immediately started running from room to room exploring. "Someone will be outside the door at all times," one of the men told me. "Don't open it for anyone except us, or Mr. Moretti. Don't leave. Don't call anyone except the numbers we've cleared." "Understood." "Understood," I said numbly. Then they were gone, and it was just me, my mother, and Emma in this impossible apartment. I put Emma to bed in one of the bedrooms, tucking her in with her rabbit. She was asleep within minutes, exhausted from the excitement. When I came back to the living room, my mother was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. "Now," she said quietly, "tell me everything."
So I did.
I told her about seeing Richard Castellano at the restaurant, about recognizing the documents, about warning Dante Moretti. I told her about Castellano's threats and Dante's protection. "Diana," my mother said when I finished. "Who is Dante Moretti?" "I don't know exactly," I admitted. "But I think he might be worse than Castellano in some ways." "Worse how?" "Castellano is a criminal who hides behind legitimacy. Dante." I trailed off, trying to find the right words. "Dante doesn't hide what he is." My mother closed her eyes. "So you saved a dangerous man from another dangerous man, and now we're under the protection of someone who might be just as bad as the person threatening us?" When she put it like that, it sounded even more insane than it already was. "I didn't know what else to do," I said. "I couldn't just watch Castellano steal that money." "Why not?" she asked, and there was no judgment in her voice, just genuine confusion. "Diana, honey, you already tried to stop him once. It destroyed your career, buried us in debt, nearly broke you. Why would you try again?" "Because someone had to," I said simply. "And I was the only person in that room who knew what was really happening." She looked at me for a long moment, then pulled me into a hug. "You're the bravest, most stubborn person I've ever known. I just hope this time it doesn't cost us everything." I hoped that too, but I wasn't sure hope was enough anymore. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the apartment made me jump. Every car on the street below made me wonder if it was Castellano coming to make good on his threats. I checked on Emma 3 times, just to make sure she was still breathing, still safe. At 6 in the morning, there was a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw Dante standing in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept either. I opened the door. "You're up early." "I don't sleep much," he said. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside to let him enter. He looked around the apartment, then at me. "Your daughter's still asleep?"
Yes.
"And my mother?" "Good. We need to talk." He moved to the windows, keeping his back to them like he was trained to never be silhouetted against light. "Old habits from a dangerous life. My people finished investigating Castellano's companies," he said. "You were right. About everything. The money laundering, the shell corporations, the fake transactions. It's all there." I felt a rush of vindication followed immediately by dread. Being right didn't fix anything. It just confirmed that I had made an enemy of someone truly untouchable. What are you going to do? I asked. Nothing. I stared at him. Nothing? You just confirmed he's a criminal. I confirmed he's a criminal I can't touch, Dante corrected. You were right about his connections, too. In the last 12 hours, I've had calls from 3 different federal prosecutors, 2 senators, and someone from the Justice Department. All of them very politely suggesting that I drop my interest in Richard Castellano. So he wins again, I said bitterly. He doesn't win. He just doesn't lose. Dante turned to face me. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Maybe not. But here's what you need to understand, Diana. Richard Castellano is protected because he has information on everyone who matters. He spent 30 years collecting leverage. He knows which senators take bribes, which judges have mistresses, which prosecutors buried evidence. He's bulletproof because destroying him would destroy half the power structure in this city. So justice doesn't matter? Truth doesn't matter? Justice and truth matter very much, Dante said quietly. But they don't always win. Sometimes the best you can do is make sure the bad guys don't win any more than they already have. That's not enough. It's going to have to be. Because the alternative is you and your family end up dead in a car accident that's not really an accident, or a home invasion gone wrong, or any number of things that Castellano can arrange while maintaining plausible deniability. The casual way he said it made my blood run cold. You think he would really kill us? I think you cost him $250 million and humiliated him in front of someone he was trying to impress. Yes, I think he would kill you. In fact, I'm certain he's already planning it. I sat down on the couch, my legs suddenly unsteady. So what do? You stay here, under protection, until I can arrange something more permanent. More permanent like what? I'm working on it, he said, which wasn't an answer at all. My mother appeared in the hallway, wrapped in a borrowed robe. Diana? Is everything okay? Mom, this is Dante Moretti. Dante, my mother, Patricia. Dante nodded respectfully. Mrs. Mercer. Mr. Moretti. Thank you for keeping my daughter safe. She saved me from making a very expensive mistake. I'm returning the favor. Emma came running out of the bedroom then, still in her pajamas. Mommy, can we have pancakes? This kitchen is huge. The normalcy of the request in the middle of this insane situation almost made me laugh. Sure, baby. Let me see what's in the fridge. Dante watched Emma run to the kitchen, something unreadable crossing his face. How old is she? 6. She looks happy. She doesn't understand how bad things are, I said. And I want to keep it that way as long as possible. He nodded slowly. I'll make sure nothing happens to her. Or to you. That's a promise. Why? I asked. Why do you care what happens to us? He was quiet for a moment, and I thought he might not answer. Then he said, because you remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who fought for what was right even when it was impossible. Someone who paid the price for being brave. What happened to them? They died, he said simply. And I couldn't save them. But I can save you. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, and his expression went dark. When? He asked. How many? Another pause. Increased security on all properties. Full lockdown protocol. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at me. I have to go. There's a situation. What kind of situation? The kind that requires my attention. Stay here. Don't leave. Don't open the door for anyone. He moved toward the exit, then paused. Diana, I meant what I said. I will keep you safe. But you need to trust me. I don't even know you. You know enough, he said. You know I keep my promises. Then he was gone. I stood there for a moment, trying to process everything, when Emma called from the kitchen. Mommy, I found eggs. I went to make pancakes with my daughter, while armed men guarded our door, and a dangerous man I barely knew promised to protect us from another dangerous man who wanted us dead. This was my life now. And I had no idea if any of us would survive it. The first 3 days in the safe house felt like living in a beautiful prison. Emma thought it was a vacation. She loved the big apartment, the huge television, the fact that she didn't have to go to school. My mother was quieter, spending most of her time reading or staring out the windows at a city we couldn't actually go out and experience. I paced. I worried. I replayed that moment in the restaurant over and over, wondering if I could have done anything differently, knowing I would probably make the same choice again. Dante called twice a day, checking in, asking if we needed anything. His men brought groceries, fresh clothes, whatever we requested. But he never came back to the apartment. He was handling the situation, whatever that meant. On the fourth day, everything fell apart. I woke up to my phone ringing at 5 in the morning. Unknown number. Hello? Diana Mercer? A woman's voice, professional, cold. Yes. This is Agent Sarah Bradley from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to speak with you about Richard Castellano. My heart stopped. How did you get this number? We've been investigating Mr. Castellano for several months. Your name came up in connection with a previous inquiry at Morrison and Associates. We understand you recently had contact with him. I can't talk about this, I said, remembering Dante's warning about not calling anyone. Ms. Mercer, we're not asking. This is an official investigation. We can speak voluntarily or we can subpoena you. Your choice. I looked at the closed door, where one of Dante's men was stationed outside. I need to consult with someone first. You have 24 hours. After that, we'll assume you're refusing to cooperate and we'll proceed accordingly. She rattled off a phone number. Call me. She hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. The FBI was involved now. This was getting worse by the minute. I called Dante. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? I told him about the FBI call. There was a long silence on the other end. Don't call them back, he said finally. They said they'll subpoena me. Let them try. Diana, listen to me carefully. If you talk to the FBI, Castellano will know within an hour. He has people everywhere, including inside federal law enforcement. The moment you become an official witness against him, you become an even bigger target. But what if they can actually do something? What if this is the chance to finally stop him? They won't stop him, Dante said, and there was something bitter in his voice. They've been investigating him for years. They never get anywhere because every time they get close, evidence disappears or witnesses recant or the investigation gets shut down from above. Talking to them won't help. It'll just get you killed faster. So, I'm supposed to just hide forever?
No.
I'm working on something better. I just need more time. How much time? A few more days. Maybe a week. Can you trust me that long? I didn't know if I could trust him at all. But I didn't have better options. Okay, I said. A week. The FBI called again that afternoon. I didn't answer. They called 3 more times over the next 2 days. I ignored all of them. On day 6, my mother collapsed. We were having lunch, something normal. Emma was drawing at the table, and my mother just suddenly gasped and fell out of her chair. 1 second she was fine, the next she was on the floor, unconscious. Mom. I dropped to my knees beside her, checking for a pulse. It was there, but weak. Emma, go to your room.
Now.
Emma ran, scared by the tone of my voice. I yanked open the apartment door. I need help. My mother collapsed. The guard rushed in, took one look, and grabbed his phone. Medical emergency. We need an ambulance. No, another voice said. Dante appeared in the doorway, moving fast.
No ambulance.
Too exposed. We'll take her to a private facility. She needs a hospital.
She needs to stay alive, Dante said.
Castellano could have people watching every emergency room in the city. We'd take her somewhere safe. He was right, but I hated it. I hated all of this. They carried my mother downstairs to a waiting car. I grabbed Emma and followed, my heart racing. We drove to a private clinic on the other side of the city, a place that looked more like a luxury spa than a medical facility. A doctor was waiting when we arrived, like he had been expecting us. They took my mother into an examination room immediately while I sat in an elegant waiting area with Emma curled up in my lap, crying softly. Dante sat beside me, silent, just present. An hour later, the doctor emerged. She's stable. It was a seizure, likely related to her previous cancer treatment. The chemotherapy can sometimes cause long-term neurological effects. She needs rest and monitoring, but she should be fine. Can I see her? Of course. My mother was in a hospital bed, looking small and fragile, hooked up to monitors. Her eyes opened when I entered. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? For being one more thing you have to worry about. I took her hand. Mom, you never apologize for being sick. Never. Diana, this can't continue. You can't keep running and hiding. Eventually, you're going to have to make a choice. What choice? Between fighting and surviving. You can't do both. Before I could respond, Dante appeared in the doorway. Diana, we need to talk.
Now.
I kissed my mother's forehead and followed him into a private office down the hall. He closed the door behind us, his expression grim. Castellano made a move, he said. He filed a restraining order against you. Claims you're stalking him, harassing him, interfering with his business. He has witnesses saying you've been acting erratically. That's insane. I haven't been anywhere near him. Doesn't matter. The order was granted. If you're found within 500 feet of him or any of his businesses, you'll be arrested. He can do that? Just lie to a judge. He can when the judge is someone he has leverage on. But there's more. He also filed a civil suit against you for defamation and tortious interference. He's claiming your accusations about his business cost him the deal with me, and he's seeking damages. How much? $250 million. I actually laughed. It was so absurd, so impossible. That laughter was the only response that made sense. I don't have $250, let alone millions. What's the point? The point is to bury you. Even though you can't pay the judgment, he can use it to seize any assets you have, garnish any wages you earn for the rest of your life. He's making sure that even if you survive this, you'll spend the rest of your life in debt to him. I sat down hard in one of the office chairs. He's not going to stop. He's going to keep coming until there's nothing left of me. Yes, Dante said simply. That's what he does. He destroys people who cross him so completely that no one else ever tries. Then why are you helping me? Why are you risking whatever relationship you have with him? Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because I'm tired of watching bad people win. And because. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face before his usual mask slid back into place. Because you deserve better than what this city has given you. There was something in the way he said it, something that made me look at him differently. This wasn't just about obligation or debt. There was something personal here, something he wasn't saying. Who did you lose? I asked softly. You said I reminded you of someone who died. His jaw tightened. My sister. She was a prosecutor, went after organized crime. She was brilliant, fearless, everything you're supposed to be in that job. She built a case against some very powerful people. What happened? They killed her. Made it look like a mugging gone wrong. She was 28 years old. His voice was flat, emotionless, but I could hear the pain underneath. I couldn't save her because I was busy building my own empire, becoming someone important. By the time I realized she was in real danger, it was too late. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be sorry. Just understand that I'm not letting it happen again. Not to you. Not to anyone else who's brave enough to stand up to these bastards. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression went cold. When? Pause. How bad? Another pause. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at me. There's a problem. A big one. What kind of problem? Someone just burned down your apartment building. The world tilted sideways. What? The building where you lived with your mother. It's gone. Fire department is calling it arson. No casualties because the building was mostly empty at that hour, but everything inside is destroyed. All of our belongings. Every photo, every memory, every piece of our lives before this nightmare. Gone. Castellano, I said. Probably. But he'll have an alibi, and there won't be any evidence tying him to it. That's his specialty. destroying people without leaving fingerprints. I thought about Emma's room, her drawings on the walls, her little bed with the princess sheets. I thought about my mother's apartment, the place she had lived for 20 years. All of it was ash now. He's not just trying to scare me, I said. He's erasing me, taking away everything I have until there's nothing left. Yes, Dante said. That's exactly what he's doing. What do I do? He looked at me for a long moment. You let me handle it. Handle it how? My way. There was something dangerous in his tone, something that reminded me that Dante Moretti was not a good man. He was a man who did bad things for what he probably considered good reasons. I don't want you to kill him, I said. I wasn't planning to. Dead men can't suffer. And I want Castellano to suffer. The viciousness in his voice should have scared me. Instead, I felt a rush of something else. Relief, maybe, that someone was finally willing to fight as dirty as Castellano did. What are you going to do? I asked. Something I should have done years ago. I'm going to take everything from him, piece by piece, until he understands what it feels like to be powerless. And me? What happens to me and my family? You stay safe. You stay hidden. And when this is over, I'll make sure you have a life again. A real one. Why would you do that for me? He stepped closer, and suddenly the space between us felt charged with something I didn't understand. Because you walked into a room full of dangerous men and told the truth even though it terrified you. Because you risked everything to save a stranger. Because you're exactly the kind of person this world needs more of. He paused. And because I haven't met anyone worth protecting in a very long time. There was something in his eyes, something intense and focused entirely on me, that made my breath catch. Dante, I started, not even sure what I was going to say. His phone rang again. He stepped back, the moment broken. I have to go. Stay here, with your mother. Don't go anywhere. I'll have my men bring Emma to you. How long? As long as it takes. He left, and I sat in that office alone trying to process everything. My home was gone. My life was gone. Everything I had built and fought for over the past 3 years had been reduced to ash by a man who faced no consequences for his cruelty. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel completely helpless. Because Dante Moretti had looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth saving, like my fight meant something. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this anymore. 2 weeks passed in that private clinic. My mother recovered slowly, gaining strength each day. Emma adapted the way children do, making games out of everything, befriending the nurses. And I waited, trapped between fear and hope, wondering if Dante would actually be able to do what he promised. He came to visit on day 15. I was sitting by my mother's bedside when he walked in, looking different somehow. Lighter, maybe. Like a weight had been lifted. Can we talk? He asked. We went to the same office as before. He closed the door and turned to face me. It's done, he said. What's done?
Castellano.
I dismantled him. I stared.
How?
I used his own tactics against him. You showed me the pattern of how his money laundering worked, so I traced every transaction, every shell company, every dirty dollar. Then I went to his partners, the people he was cleaning money for, and showed them proof that he was skimming off the top, taking more than his agreed percentage. Was he? Probably not. But I made it look like he was. Forged documents, fabricated transfers, planted evidence in his own accounts. Everything he's been doing to other people for 30 years, I did to him in 2 weeks. And they believed you? Criminals are paranoid by nature. They always suspect betrayal because they would betray anyone themselves. I just gave them confirmation of what they already feared. His partners turned on him overnight, pulled their money, canceled their arrangements, spread the word that he couldn't be trusted. But what about his political connections? The judges and senators. Dante smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. I reached out to a few people I know in various agencies. Mentioned that I had detailed records of Castellano's illegal activities, including which government officials were on his payroll. Suggested that maybe they would want those records to disappear in exchange for them cutting all ties with him and forgetting he ever existed. They went for it. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. Every single one of them abandoned him to save themselves. Within a week, Richard Castellano went from untouchable to completely alone. I couldn't quite process what I was hearing. So he's finished? Financially ruined, legally vulnerable, personally destroyed. The restraining order against you was dismissed. The civil suit was withdrawn. He has bigger problems now than you. Like what? Like federal prosecutors who suddenly found their courage once his protection disappeared. Like former partners who want their money back. Like a reputation so shattered that he'll never do business in this city again.
Dante leaned against the desk.
He's not dead, but he wishes he was. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. All of this because I warned you not to sign those papers. All of this because you were brave enough to tell the truth when no one else would.
You started this, Diana.
I just finished it. What happens now? Now you get your life back. Better than before, actually. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is for you. I opened it. Inside was a check for $250,000. What is this? The money you saved me by stopping that deal. Consider it payment for services rendered. Dante, I can't take this. You can and you will. You have student loans, medical debt, years of lost income to make up for. This isn't charity. You earned it. I stared at the check, and more money than I had seen since losing my job. Money that could clear my debts, give Emma a better life, let my mother retire comfortably. There's something else, Dante said. A job offer. I need someone with your skills to oversee my legitimate business operations. Someone who can spot fraud, analyze finances, keep everything clean. The pay is triple what you made at Morrison and Associates. Full benefits. Flexible hours so you can be with your daughter. You're offering me a job? You're brilliant at what you do. I'd be stupid not to hire you. I don't know anything about your businesses. You'll learn. And, Diana. He stepped closer. They're legitimate. I'm not Castellano. I don't launder money or run criminal enterprises. What I do isn't always pretty, but it's legal. Why do I have trouble believing that? He almost smiled. Because you're smart enough to know that legal and moral aren't always the same thing. But I promise you this. If you work for me, you'll never be asked to do anything that compromises your integrity. You'll never be asked to look the other way or falsify records or protect criminals. That's my word. I looked at the check, at this impossible offer, at this man who had somehow become my savior, and maybe something more. I need to think about it, I said. Take all the time you need. But Diana. He reached out, his hand cupping my face gently. You don't have to keep fighting alone anymore. Let me help you build something better. The touch sent electricity through me. This was dangerous in a completely different way than Castellano had been dangerous. This was the kind of danger that made you want to lean in instead of run away. I'm not looking for a relationship, I said quietly. I have Emma to think about. My mother. I can't afford complications. I'm not asking for a relationship, he said. I'm asking for a chance.
To get to know you.
To show you that not every powerful man in this city is a monster. What are you, then? Someone who sees you for exactly who you are and thinks you're extraordinary. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, soft and careful, asking rather than taking. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine. Think about the job offer, he said. And think about whether you're ready to stop surviving and start living again. Then he left, leaving me standing there with a check that could change my life and the memory of a kiss that suggested maybe I deserved more than I had let myself imagine. My mother was awake when I returned to her room. He's in love with you, she said. Mom, that's ridiculous. We barely know each other. I saw the way he looked at you. That man would burn the world down for you. He kind of already did burn down Castellano's world. She smiled weakly. Are you going to take the job? I don't know. Is it crazy to work for someone like him? Is it any crazier than everything else you've done? Diana, honey, you've spent 3 years being punished for doing the right thing. Maybe it's time to let yourself be rewarded for it. I looked at the check in my hand. $250,000. A fresh start. A real life for Emma, for all of us. Maybe you're right, I said. 3 days later, I accepted Dante's offer. Both of them. 6 months transformed everything. I moved out of the clinic safe house and into an actual apartment, a nice one in a good neighborhood with a proper bedroom for Emma and space for my mother. I paid off every debt, every collection agency, every dollar I owed. My credit score slowly started to recover. The job was challenging in the best way. Dante's business empire was vast and complicated, but legitimate like he promised. Real estate development, security services, consulting firms. I analyzed everything, built systems to catch fraud before it happened, cleaned up inefficiencies. It felt good to use my brain again for something other than survival. And Dante. He was careful with me, patient. We had dinner once a week, sometimes with Emma, sometimes just the two of us. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He showed up for Emma's school play. He checked on my mother. He was present without being possessive. I was falling for him, slowly and terrifyingly. Emma adored him. She called him Mr. Dante and showed him every drawing she made. He treated her like she mattered, like her opinions were important, like she was a real person instead of just a kid to be tolerated. My mother approved, though she worried. He's still a dangerous man, Diana. Don't forget that. I hadn't forgotten. But I was starting to understand that dangerous didn't mean evil, and that sometimes the most dangerous people were the ones willing to protect what mattered. Then, 7 months after everything changed, I got a phone call that brought it all back. Diana Mercer? A man's voice, official. Yes. This is Detective Frank Morrison with the Fraud Division. We need you to come to the precinct. Richard Castellano has been arrested, and we need your testimony. I sat down hard. Arrested for what? Money laundering, fraud, conspiracy. Multiple charges. Your original investigation from Morrison and Associates is part of the evidence chain. We need your statement. When? Today, if possible. This case has been building for months, and we're ready to move forward. I called Dante immediately. He answered on the first ring, like always. The police want me to testify against Castellano, I said. Silence. Then, are you going to do it? Should I? That depends. Do you trust the justice system to actually hold him accountable this time? I don't know. But I have to try, don't I? Otherwise, everything I went through was for nothing. More silence. Then Dante said, I'll come with you. At the precinct, Detective Morrison was professional and thorough. He had copies of my original research, documentation I thought had been destroyed. Apparently, someone at Morrison and Associates had kept backup files, and they had finally surfaced. Your analysis was the key that broke this open, Morrison said. Everything you identified 3 years ago, we were able to verify and expand on. Castellano's entire operation is laid out in these documents. Where did you get them? He smiled slightly.
Anonymous tip.
Someone sent us complete files 6 months ago. I looked at Dante, who was sitting beside me looking completely innocent. 6 months ago? Must have been around the time Castellano's world started falling apart, Dante said casually. He had done this. He had made sure the evidence survived, had gotten it to the right people, had set this entire thing in motion. We need you to testify before the grand jury, Morrison continued. Explain your methodology, verify your findings, establish the pattern of fraud. Will you do it?
I looked at Dante.
He nodded once, permission and support and promise all in one gesture. Yes, I said. I'll testify. The grand jury hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, I prepared obsessively, reviewing every detail of my original investigation, making sure I could explain everything clearly. The night before the hearing, Dante took me to dinner. Not our usual casual place, but somewhere elegant and expensive, the kind of restaurant I used to go to when I had a career. You nervous? He asked over wine. Terrified, I admitted. What if they don't believe me? What if Castellano somehow gets off again? Then we keep fighting. But Diana, you've already won. You survived him. You rebuilt your life. You're happy again, or at least on your way to happy. Nothing that happens tomorrow changes that. He destroyed 3 years of my life. And you destroyed his empire in response. I'd say you came out ahead. I looked at this man across from me, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who had become essential to my existence. I love you, I said, the words surprising me even as I said them. He went very still. Say that again. I love you. I probably shouldn't, and it's probably a terrible idea, but I do. He reached across the table and took my hand. I've loved you since the moment you walked into that restaurant and told Richard Castellano to leave. You were shaking and terrified and absolutely magnificent, and I knew right then that I would do whatever it took to keep you safe. That's not love. That's protection. It's both. Diana, I haven't let anyone matter to me in years.
It was safer that way.
But you. He squeezed my hand. You made me want to be someone worth loving. You already are. He stood up, pulling me with him. Let's get out of here. We went back to my apartment. My mother was watching Emma, both of them asleep on the couch in front of a movie. Dante carried Emma to her bed, while I woke my mother gently. You two look happy, she whispered. We are, I said. After my mother went to her room, I found Dante standing by the window, looking out at the city. You should go, I said. I need to be sharp tomorrow. I should, he agreed. But he didn't move. I walked to him, wrapping my arms around him from behind. Thank you. For everything. For saving me when I couldn't save myself. He turned, pulling me close. You saved yourself. I just made sure you had the chance. He kissed me then, deep and slow and full of promises we hadn't made yet, but probably would. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against his. Stay, I said. He stayed. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with Dante beside me, ready to finally tell the truth about Richard Castellano in a forum where it would actually matter. The grand jury room was smaller than I expected, just 23 citizens sitting in chairs, listening intently as I walked them through 3 years of investigation in 2 hours. I showed them the shell companies, the fake transactions, the pattern of money laundering that moved hundreds of millions of dollars through legitimate-looking businesses. I explained everything in clear, simple terms that anyone could understand. When I finished, the room was silent. Ms. Mercer, the prosecutor said, in your professional opinion, was Richard Castellano engaged in systematic criminal activity?
Yes.
Without question. And did you report this to your superiors at Morrison and Associates? I did. They fired me to protect him. Why are you testifying now? I looked at the faces of those 23 strangers, normal people who still believe the system could work. Because someone has to stand up and tell the truth, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything. Because that's the only way justice ever happens. The grand jury voted to indict on all charges. 2 months later, Richard Castellano stood trial. I testified again, this time in open court, with Dante in the gallery watching. Castellano's lawyers tried to discredit me, painting me as bitter and obsessed, but the evidence spoke for itself. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. As they led him away, Castellano looked at me one last time. There was no rage now, just empty defeat. He had finally faced consequences, and it had destroyed him completely. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not vindication. Just relief that it was finally over. 1 year after Richard Castellano went to prison, Dante asked me to marry him. We were at the park with Emma, watching her play on the swings, when he pulled out a ring and got down on one knee like we were in some romantic movie. I know this is fast, he said. And I know your life has been chaos for years, and maybe you want stability instead of more change. But Diana, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you. Emma had stopped swinging and was watching with huge eyes. Is Mr. Dante going to be my daddy? She asked. Only if your mom says yes, Dante told her. I looked at this man who had saved me, who had believed in me, who had loved me even when I was broken. I looked at Emma's hopeful face. I thought about my mother, healthy and happy in her own apartment nearby, finally free from worry. Yes, I said. Absolutely yes. We got married 3 months later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Emma was the flower girl and took her job very seriously. My mother cried happy tears. And when Dante kissed me at the altar, I felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Safe. Loved.
Home. My career flourished. I became chief financial officer of Dante's entire operation, respected and well paid. I hired 2 assistants, built a team, created systems that other companies wanted to copy. Morrison and Associates went bankrupt 6 months after Castellano's conviction. Turned out protecting criminals wasn't a sustainable business model once those criminals couldn't protect you back. I felt nothing about that either. They had made their choices. Emma thrived. She had a father now, a real one who showed up for every recital and parent-teacher conference. She had a beautiful home, good schools, everything I had wanted to give her, but couldn't for so long. My mother's cancer stayed in remission. She volunteered at the hospital where she had been treated, helping other patients navigate their own journeys. She told me once that going through hell had taught her how to help others find their way out. 2 years after the wedding, I got pregnant. A baby girl we named Hope, because that felt right. Emma was thrilled to be a big sister. Life wasn't perfect. Dante's work still involved danger sometimes, and I still worried. But we navigated it together, partners in every sense. One evening, I was putting Emma to bed when she asked, "Mommy, do you ever miss your old life?" What old life? When it was just us and Grandma, before Daddy. I thought about the tiny apartment, the constant fear, the crushing debt, the feeling that I would never be more than what poverty and revenge had made me. "No, baby," I said honestly. "I don't miss it at all." "Me neither. I like our family now." "Me too." After Emma fell asleep, I found Dante in his office, working on something he wouldn't tell me about. He looked up when I entered and smiled, the real smile he saved just for me. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said, settling into his lap. "I was just thinking about how far we've come." "We have come far. From that restaurant where you scared the hell out of me by interfering in my business." "I saved you," I corrected. "You did. In more ways than one." He kissed my forehead. "I was empty before you, Diana. Going through the motions of living without actually being alive. You changed that. You saved me too. You gave me back everything I thought I'd lost forever." We sat like that for a while, comfortable in the silence. "I have something to tell you," Dante said eventually. "What?" "I've been approached about running for city council. Someone has to clean up the corruption in this town, make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." I pulled back to look at him. "You want to go into politics?" "I want to make a difference. Use what I know about how this city really works to fix it. Would you be okay with that?" I thought about it. Dante in public office, our lives under scrutiny, the dangers that came with political power. But I also thought about all the people like me, destroyed by systems that protected criminals and punished whistleblowers. "I think you'd be incredible," I said. "And I think you're exactly the kind of person this city needs. Even if it means dealing with reporters and campaigns and all that chaos. We've survived worse. We can handle this too." He kissed me then, deep and grateful. Later that night, after Dante was asleep, I stood by the window of our bedroom looking out at the city lights. So much had changed since that night in the restaurant when I made the stupidest, bravest decision of my life. I had lost everything and gained everything back, plus more than I ever imagined. I thought about all of you watching this, listening to my story, maybe facing your own impossible choices about whether to speak up or stay silent. Here's what I learned. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. Sometimes it breaks you completely. Sometimes you lose so much that you're not sure you'll ever find your way back. But here's what else I learned. You're stronger than you think. The losses teach you what really matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the universe sends someone who sees your worth even when you've forgotten it yourself. I'm not going to lie and say it was worth it because those 3 years of hell nearly destroyed me. But I will say this. I'd make the same choice again. Because being able to look at myself in the mirror Knowing I stood up for what was right even when it was terrifying, that matters more than comfort or safety or any amount of money. Your courage matters. Your truth matters. You matter. So if you're facing your own Richard Castellano right now, whatever form he takes, know that you're not alone. Know that speaking up might cost you everything, but staying silent costs you your soul. And know that somewhere out there, someone is listening to your truth and believing you, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button. Subscribe because I promise there are more stories coming, more truths that need to be told. Drop a comment and tell me about a time you had to choose between doing the right thing and doing the easy thing. I read every single one. And to everyone watching from wherever you are, New York or London or anywhere in between, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about justice and truth and the belief that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. My name is Diana Moretti now. I'm a wife, a mother, a CFO, and a woman who learned that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's being absolutely terrified and doing the right thing anyway. This was my story. What's yours going to be? Until next time, remember, your voice matters. Your courage matters. You matter. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Stay brave out there.